Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Here is a preview of the middle splits program I give to my clients. This is the accumulation phase, usually done after kind of a preliminary screening phase using FRC principles. So without further ado, here is the program. So what we have here is a warm-up activation circuit. Basically, you'll go through all 5 exercises continuously without break between the cat-cow, hip controlled articulations, hollow body with block, low bridge with block, and a half frog liftoff. For the cat-cow, you want to focus on slowly articulating through the spine in terms of extension and flexion. So here I'm really trying to focus on each vertebra, moving independently before I create interdependence between the spine. Usually you'd like to go through about 5 reps of those slow articulations, stopping at the sticky points, really focusing on the belly pulling in towards the spine, keeping a nice, tight abdomen. And then after your 5 reps of slow articulations, you want to try to create a global head-tail connection with 5 cat-cows. On the last rep, hold the cat position as much as possible for about 10 seconds in terms of a hard contraction, and then same thing with the extension, avoiding pinching in the low back, so really focusing on that thoracic extension. So next up we have our hip-controlled articular rotations, or CARs. This comes out of the functional range conditioning world. So in this exercise, I'm using a stick, one as support, but also a way to help with increased irradiation in terms of tension. Basically what we're trying to do here is hit all the angles of the hip and really stimulate the mechanoreceptors within the joint capsule. So we're focusing on external rotation, internal rotation, AB and adduction, along with a light bit of flexion and extension. Big things here are remaining tight within the abdomen, avoiding too much compensation. You'll see that my left hip hikes up a little bit, so I do want to try to avoid that. But on this turn here, really focusing on the ankle, trying to get about as high as the knee, squeezing in towards the side body, and then rotating back out the same way you came in, performing about 5 reps each side. Next we have low bridge lifts with a block. So basically here, placing the block between the thighs, squeezing the block, keeping the tailbone lightly tucked so it helps to create an exhale first so that low back flattens, press through the heels, lift the hips. Avoiding overarching, so again you want to keep the abdomen tight, not going past neutral spine. And like the other exercises, if you'd like, the last rep, holding for 10 seconds, creating some tension there, just layering, almost like you're trying to squeeze your butt harder and harder for each second, for a total of 10 reps with a 10-second hold. Final warm-up exercise we have here is the half frog passive range liftoff. The big focus is on sending the knee over to the side a little bit more, and then squeezing the butt to lift the knee and ankle off the floor. It's very easy to get the ankle off the floor. The main focus is that knee lifting. You may cheat by driving through your elbow a little bit, and over time, try to work on less compensation through the elbow. If that feels easy, extend the leg out to the side. No matter which one you choose, 10 seconds both sides. So now we're actually getting into the strength work. First thing I have my clients do is the horse stance squat. So this is a 5-step horse stance, heel toeing out. Feet can either be parallel or slightly turned out based on mobility. Big thing here is keeping the tailbone tucked or relatively neutral spine. Chest perpendicular with the floor. It's very easy to compensate by hinging. Coming down to about parallel and coming back up. The block is there to create some more irradiation. Also helps to keep the chest from flaring. Focusing on the knees spreading so that they're tracking over top of the toes, really using the lower butt muscles here. And what I like to prescribe is about 10 reps. And on that 10th rep, holding for 10 seconds. If it's the last set, maybe 30-second hold with a tempo of 2 seconds down, 3-second pause, explosive up, 1 second pause at the top. Second strength piece is the superset between active pigeon and adductor lifts, prescribing either 3 to 5 sets, 10 reps with a 10-second hold at the top, tempo being 2-second eccentric, 1 second pause, explosive up, 2-second pause at the top for these. So in the active pigeon, setting up in a shin box position, it's more of a 45-degree angle than your typical 90-90. The main focus here is on using the glutes to squeeze to come up into that extended position in the hips, keeping the abdomen tight, neutral spine as you really reach back with the butt to sit back down. You'll feel a nice eccentric loaded stretch in the glutes as you do so. Big focus is on trying to get the opposite hip or the trail leg hip down first, as to avoid leaning too much to one side. Highly recommend using a pad here because it could be pretty tough on the shin if you're doing it on a hardwood floor. Active pigeon is followed by the adductor lifts as a superset, so basically no break in between. Assuming a side plank position, placing the top leg on about the height of a chair. It could be something a little bit lower, especially if you feel any pinching in the inside of your knee. Trying to keep a nice hollow body, neutral spine, avoiding too much of an arch in the low back. I'm using the top leg to really squeeze and press myself up to neutral. Bottom trail leg is trying to squeeze in to the top leg, almost like you're trying to pop a balloon in between the thighs. Now this switches over into isometric strength where we're actually working on the middle split itself. Going for just a 70% maximum middle split length, which should have been measured in centimeters beforehand, focusing on that pales and rails contraction. For the middle split hold, heel toeing out till you get to that 70% your max length in centimeters. Might be helpful to have some type of tape to measure that. We are actually working on spinal extension here. So one, it's a controlled twerk butt, you can think of it that way, or anterior pelvic tilt, and also a bit of thoracic extension. After you've found that piece, you're going to ramp up for 10 seconds, squeezing or pinching the floor. After 10 seconds, creating the rails contraction of spreading the floor apart and actively pulling yourself into a deeper position so the feet might actually slide out. You don't want to go too far, certainly not your max effort. The big thing here is, can you still keep that pales and rails contraction? I suggest heel toeing back out of the position to work on that strength. Now that the main work is over, we're going to get into the accessory work, which are straddle good mornings. There's a beginner's option, and there's a more intermediate / advanced option. So option 1 for beginners, heel toeing out to a wide-legged position, usually about 5 to 7 steps. Let it be a place where you can bend the knees so that it's not so much a stretch for the low back. Really maintain a neutral spine, hinging from the hips, finding what that maximum hinge is before you start to compensate through the low back. Then from there, the initiation comes from the hips once again to hinge, butt sending back, knees slightly bent, hands reach overhead. You should really feel this through the entire posterior chain, particularly the hamstrings. Option B, for more intermediate advanced, I'd only give this to somebody if they can already sit in the straddle with a neutral spine, meaning that the back isn't rounded. The first option is to slide the block on the floor like you're pushing it away. A more advanced option is the hands up and overhead. Really focus on keeping a nice tight abdomen. The thing I'm focusing on to touch down first is the pelvic floor, or the pelvis, I should say, and then abdomen, then chest, rather than just the head going down. Like the other exercise, both of these are about 10 reps per set, and at a tempo of 2 seconds down, 2 to 1 second pause at the bottom, explosive up, 1 second pause at the top. Finally, we have our cool down superset, which is wide-legged forward fold and deer pose, also known as 90-90. So for the wide-legged forward fold, this goes for anyone. Placing a pad underneath to keep that spine in a relatively neutral position here, as high as you need to. I'm going to use a block or maybe a bolster for some type of support. First placing it on my torso, maybe after 30 seconds I can lower myself down even further and further, but always maintaining a neutral spine. Other options here are to explore side-to-side stretch. Big thing here that we're just focusing on is staying relaxed, accumulating about 3 to 5 minutes. The final cool down position is deer pose, also known as 90-90. So basically here the trail leg internally rotates as you square the chest over top of the front shin. Ideally, the chest is right in the middle of that front shin, so you might need to slide the foot over slightly. Just doing the best you can. If this is a troubled position to be in, I suggest placing a block or a mat or a blanket underneath that lead leg. Keeping a neutral spine, hinge from the hips, focus on the chest reaching past the shin rather than the head just dipping down. And while you're there, this is supposed to be kind of a passive stretch, so exploring different angles, seeing which position is going to be best to stretch out your glutes. 3 to 4 second inhale, 6 second exhale. And just as a safety reminder, consult with your primary care physician before starting any of these types of exercise routines. I want everyone to be safe, especially when you're just looking at things online. And of course, feel free to check out my website for details on privates and online training. You can also follow me on Instagram. Once again, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you got something out of this. Have a great one.